This was a chaotic world in which there was not a trace of light, and the entire universe was tightly clumped together. It was unknown how many billions of years. The universe was still the same. Universe and everything had not changed in the slightest. However, on this day, some subtle changes took place in the big egg of the universe. With a cry, the first life in the world was born in this big egg. He opened his eyes and found himself in a small space, surrounded by darkness, and could not see anything. But soon he adapted to the environment and began to try to move his limbs. Slowly, his hands and feet became more and more flexible, and his brain began to work. It didn't take long for him to grow into a creature with hands and feet and a mind. His appearance was similar to what we humans look like now, but he was taller and more burly than us. His name was Pangu, a huge giant. On this day, Pangu was sitting there in a daze when he suddenly felt a wave of sleepiness and fell asleep. The world in his dream was colorful, making people feel relaxed and happy. Pangu roamed in his dream for a long time, and gradually, he felt a little bored, so he planned to go back to the real world to have a look. So he stretched and was about to get up, but found that his movements could not be used. He looked down and saw that he was actually trapped in a huge eggshell. This made him feel very angry because he had been here for 18,000 years. At this moment, he finally couldn't hold back the anger in his heart and thought, "This hateful egg has bound me for 18,000 years. Now that I want to touch him, he won't allow it. It seems that it is time to find a way to get rid of this guy." So he raised his strong hands, held the top half of the egg, and then did his best to lift his arms up and his legs down. The effort finally paid off, and by this time he had heard the subtle cracking sound of the egg, and he knew that success was just around the corner. Suddenly, there was an earth-shattering noise in the universe. Chaos and darkness ran out of the egg, and after they circled around Pangu, they wrapped around him tightly. Pangu was angry. He didn't understand why these guys didn't let him go, so he decided to give the opponent a fatal blow. Chaos and darkness were beaten to pieces and slowly separated. Those turbid and heavy things sank and became the earth. Just like that, heaven and earth were separated. At this time, Pangu also breathed a sigh of relief. He stood up and stretched his waist. He was so happy because he no longer had to be bound by that hateful cage, and the hated darkness and chaos would not bother him again. But it didn't take long for him to suddenly feel dizzy, as if something was about to rush up and devour him. So he reached out and touched. Oh my God! It turned out that his stomach was about to break. What should I do? Do you want to be locked back? Thinking of this, he was very anxious and quickly found a place to sit down, took a few deep breaths, and slowly calmed down. Then he stood up abruptly and shouted loudly, "Whoever dares to eat this uncle, I will flatten him to death." This roar was indeed useful, and his stomach stopped moving. So he held the sky in his hands and stepped on the ground, standing majestically in the universe for 18,000 years. Until one day, he could no longer stand this kind of life. So he chose to end it. In the chaos of the universe, Pangu opened his eyes and used all his strength to support the sky. For the next 18,000 years, he couldn't sleep, sit, or lie down because as long as he moved a little, the sky above was in danger of falling. The only thing he could do was to change his hands occasionally to relieve the pain in his palms. Every day, his body grew by a foot, and the sky also rose by a foot. Day after day, year after year, 18,000 years passed in a flash. At this moment, Pangu has grown into a giant with a height of 90 miles, and the distance between heaven and earth has also become 90,000 miles. He glanced around and smiled with relief. Although he had already created the world, there was no light, no water, no mountains, no minerals, no living things, no flowers, trees, no birds, no animals, not even humans. There were still too many things waiting for him to create. Therefore, he opened his eyes wide and took a deep breath, which turned into wind clouds, and thunder, blowing all over the world. Then he exhaled again, which turned into the sun and the moon, illuminating the whole world. Then he exhaled continuously, turning into mountains and rivers, sowing seeds and fruits. Finally, he exhaled his last breath with a smile on his face, regret in his heart, and tears in his eyes. He let out an earth-shattering roar, and then slowly fell down. A miraculous change took place between heaven and earth. The breath that Pangu exhaled before he died became wind and clouds. His right eye became a bright and gentle moon, and his tears became a great river that nourished the growth of all things. Pangu fell and could no longer stand up. His muscles became fertile ground, and his meridians became crisscrossing roads. This is far from over. His hair has turned into all kinds of plants on land, including flowers, grass, trees, and forests. They slowly rise into the sky and then fall down from the air, which is the rain we usually see. The souls of Pangu wandered in the world, and slowly they became all kinds of animals in this new world, including birds, beasts, fish, and insects. At this point, Pangu had completed his mission and died completely.